Hey guys, welcome to the Adam and Nart Show. Today my guest is a professor, and he is the ex-dean of the Pharmacy College in Ajman University and a microbiology professor. Today my guest is Dr. Samir Bloukh. Dr. Samir, thank you for coming today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming. Dr. Samir, why don't we start this episode by telling us more about yourself? By the way, this subject is very fascinating and it's huge. We're talking about microbiology, viruses, bacteria, vaccinations, COVID, all of these things. Yes. But why don't you tell us, Dr. Samir, more about yourself first?
Yes, I started my career in the very beginning when I was very young, 23 years old, in the field of vaccine production.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I worked for 5 years in vaccine production for the Ministry of Health, and then I developed allergy, so I shifted to diagnostic microbiology, and this gave me the interest to continue, and then I continued my studies for MSc and PhD in Manchester University, and as you know, now I am professor in microbiology at Ajman University.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the basics of viruses and bacteria and fungi? Now, we're not going to give a lecture here, so this is not a university lecture hall, but a brief introduction for all of these things, these little fascinating creatures. What are they?
So all what you mentioned will be under a name of pathogens.
Yes.
Because all of these are causing us troubles, disease, morbidities, mortalities. So if we start with the smallest one, which is the virus. Virus is very strangely, very simple, and it is even not considered as living unless it is inside our cells.
Yeah.
So it is just genetic material, little amount, covered by a protein coat called capsid.
Are they considered living?
They are considered living when they are in our cells.
Ah, interesting.
But outside the body, outside the cells, they are not considered living.
All right.
So genetic material, DNA or RNA, coated with a coat of protein. So this is called naked virus. Then we have additionally these viruses, they steal our membrane, part of our membrane, and make another coat, double layer phospholipid, and this is what is called enveloped virus.
Okay.
So it's very small, very simple, having very rarely enzymes, using all the machinery of our cells.
Okay.
So this is regarding the virus.
Okay.
And you know that it is killing, it is causing diseases, etc.
Right.
If we go to the bacteria, it is more complicated than the virus. It is bigger in size. It is consisting only of the genetic material, genome of DNA, and it is having many other things, and it is much bigger than the virus. So bacteria killed by antibiotics, keeping aside the resistance problem, which is globally now.
Dr. Samir, regarding the bacteria, not all of them are pathogenic, right? Some of them are beneficial.
No, actually the minority. The minority is pathogenic,
yes.
and the majority are not.
Oh, and the majority is not?
Yeah,
okay.
And by the way, we are having in our body, 10 times our number cells.
Wow.
Yeah.
That many bacteria.
Yeah. So if you want to measure it by its cells number, we are more bacteria than humans.
Wow. Wow. Okay. And viruses, are they smaller or bigger than bacteria?
No, viruses, they are from 10, 20 nanometer till like HIV 100, 120.
Okay. So they're smaller.
Very small.
They're smaller than
because
bacteria.
We have viruses that attack bacteria.
Wow,
and live in bacteria and multiply in bacteria. We call it bacteriophages. So you can imagine the size between virus and bacteria. So bacteria, of course, much larger than the virus. Yeah. Fungus, this is another microorganism.
Yeah.
And the fungus, it is actually, it is considered eukaryotes, like our cells. Our cells are eukaryote. But the bacteria is prokaryote, so it is simpler than human cells. And there is more differences than our cells. Therefore, we can have targets in bacteria by which we can hit and either inhibit or kill the bacteria. But in fungus, it is much less the choices. We have limited choices to use antifungal drugs.
So that means fungi
more related to our cells. You know, our cells are having the same, we are all eukaryotes. So the targets that we can hit in the fungus is limited.
Limited.
Usually it is either the DNA of the genome of the fungus or the membrane.
So that means they're more difficult to treat with antifungal medications?
Now we have 2 families of drugs which are working well, but if we lose these, then we have a trouble.
Oh, that's horrible. What can you tell us about the impact of these microorganisms on our daily life? How do these things impact us?
Yeah. Luckily, we don't see these microorganisms.
Exactly, luckily, because there are too many of them, right?
Because,
Billions of them.
Of course, because where you are looking, where you are sitting, where you are touching microorganisms.
Thank God I'm not a germaphobe, so when I look at surfaces...
that we don't see them.
No, but some people are, Dr. Bloukh. Some people are germaphobes. So they always constantly wash their hands. And they're always thinking about that.
But this is not going to help.
Exactly.
They are everywhere.
They're everywhere.
In our body, on our body, everywhere. So it was not going to help.
You can't stop that,
And we said minority of them is pathogenic and causing morbidities and mortalities.
Thank God.
Yeah. But this minority is filling books, on the shelves of the libraries.
Exactly, that minority, subhanAllah.
But we have so many these bacteria and pathogens which are very good in industry, in dairy products, in alcohol production, fermentation, in nutrition, and so many other fields. So and even now they are using microorganisms to degrade oil spills from the ships, tankers in the sea. So they will send these
bacteria.
Bacteria which will degrade. So this is a new aspect of microbiology to remove these spills of oil from big tankers. So of course microorganism bacteria is very important in our life.
What about the bacteria in our gut? I heard a lot of good things about that. What do you call that? The flora? The
normal flora.
Yeah. So that is sometimes impacted due to illness or even antibiotics, right? Yes. What can you tell us, Doc, about that?
As I told you, we have so many bacteria living in us and on us.
Yeah.
So among those who are in us, these
the good guys.
They are good guys who are in our gut, and they are occupying certain locations, which we call receptors.
Right.
And they are sitting there. And their presence and occupation in these places will prevent pathogens. And pathogens, when they come as intruders, they have to search for a location for a receptor, but these already there. Now, when we disturb the balance, when we disturb these pathogens by taking, for example, antibiotics, then we are killing these good guys, and then we are disturbing the balance inside our gut and giving chance for resistant strains to be selected and to then multiply in our body and cause us trouble.
And that's why, Dr. Bloukh, sometimes I noticed when I go to the doctor, if somebody needs antibiotics, sometimes the doctors prescribe probiotics.
Yes, this is, This is the normal flora.
Right.
When somebody is under antibiotic for some time, it is very advisable after finishing the course to take to renew these good guys by taking probiotics, so that it will again the normal number, the normal receptors where they will sit and they will compete for pathogens.
So you can replenish those good guys in your gut.
Yes.
They help also in digestion, correct?
They help in the digestion, in production of certain vitamins in the body. So if they are not good, will not be there in our body.
Absolutely.
The bad thing about this, that if this is, of course, when your immunity is normal, once the immunity starts deteriorating, like in HIV or any other causative agent that will reduce immunity, then these become opportunistic pathogens. They will feel that now they can attack, and they forget our friendship, and then they can cause harm.
They can turn on us.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had no idea.
This is because of our normal immune system.
Yeah.
So we have no problem.
Yeah.
Once this normal immune system becomes subnormal, then they will become therefore we call it opportunistic, because they take the opportunity of your weak immunity, then they jump and they can cause trouble. And also these normal flora, if they are changing their habitat from the gut to urinary tract, for example, they become real pathogens, and they can
become pathogenic.
Yeah, they become urinary tract infection. So this is also another aspect of normal flora.
Speaking of bacteria, Dr. Bloukh, now there's also this huge issue of antibiotic resistance.
Yeah, this is antimicrobial resistance.
Exactly. Now,
Yeah.
this is a huge problem. WHO, I think they warned a lot of people all over the world because of this.
Yes.
What is going on there? What's the latest research on this? Now, I noticed from my personal experience that doctors these days, they usually now, I think this is because of the recommendations of the WHO, they usually don't recommend antibiotics or antibiotic courses, right?
Yes.
Immediately. I think this is something to do with the new guidelines so that they don't have this kind of resistance.
Yes.
What can you tell us about the antibiotic resistance, and what happens if we do have a catastrophe of antibiotic resistance? Do we need a new line of drugs?
First of all, let us speak about resistance. I will start with giving one example. We have a species called Staphylococcus aureus.
Yeah.
When in the beginning of the antibiotic era, penicillin was the first antibiotic to be discovered.
Yeah.
This bacteria, this
What was the name of the guy? Sorry, Doc? Alexander Fleming? What was it?
Yes, Fleming.
Right. I remember that from my...
Sir Alexander Fleming.
Exactly, from my high school days.
Yes. So
Yeah.
he was the one who discovered it by chance.
Yeah.
And the Staphylococcus aureus, 95% of isolated species were sensitive to penicillin.
Yeah.
Now, with continuous use, only 5% is sensitive to it.
Yeah.
And this is because this bacteria was able to produce an enzyme called penicillinase, which will attack the penicillin, destroy it, and become resistant.
Yeah.
So this is just an example. Now, we have a general rule about it. The more you use it, the more you lose it. The antibiotics, the
I like that. The more you use it, the more you lose it.
So now we have, because of the continuous use of antibiotics, especially in the hospitals, and hospitals are the place where these multi-drug resistant bacteria organisms are living. And from there comes these nosocomial infections, means infections acquired in the hospital. And usually these will be the bacteria which were under pressure of antibiotics, mutated or acquired genes from other bacteria through what we call plasmid, and then became resistant. So this is now a global problem. And, the companies, the pharmaceutical companies, doing research to introduce new antibiotics, now they said we don't want to produce. We better for us to work on chronic diseases rather than antibiotics. Because,
they don't want to introduce a new class of
because when
drugs.
we work on it before, this is their excuse, before we get our research and development money back, then the bacteria become resistant to it, and then we lose.
Oh, man.
So this is very good excuse by the companies, pharmaceutical companies, so that they pressurize governments to give them money. And this is what's happening now in developed countries. These big companies now, they get a good amount of money, asking them, please do research and continue producing antibiotics, because they say this is number one, that they cannot get back the research development money. Number two, that clinical trials are very expensive. So this is another problem. Therefore, we are gradually losing more and more antibiotics, and there is no replenishment in the market for new antibiotics.
But that's a disaster, Doc, because look, all modern science, all modern medicine is based on antibiotics.
Yes,
all
of
these
course.
infections that we're fighting.
All bacterial infections.
Bacterial infections,
Yes.
of course. If something happens and...
No, this is now happening.
It's happening already.
Now we have 23,000 people are killed in America by super bugs.
Exactly, that's the name, superbugs.
These are the multi-drug resistant bacteria.
Yeah.
There are examples, like there was a model from, I forgot which country. She got urinary tract infection, which is usually anybody can get.
A UTI, yeah.
UTI. Then they did not find any antibiotic that can cure that. All the antibiotics were not working on the bacteria.
Wow.
So this is superbug, and she was killed, and she was model, very young lady, and she died. And this is now in rise. It is continuing. And as I told you, we are using much Therefore, also, I remember when I was in the first degree, we were told in microbiology that when you have viral infection, you have to give in viral infection antibiotic course. Why? To prevent secondary bacterial infection.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this was among the factors that created this resistance. Now, this is totally different and changed, and only you have to give antibiotic when really it is needed and it is necessary. And you should not go to the recent antibiotics unless you know that the first generation, the first old antibiotics are not working, and then you go to the next and
the next one.
Yeah.
So the old guidelines have been updated. By the way,
Yes.
you're right. The old guidelines, maybe they were based on, let's say, incorrect information, which is
At that time, it was
exactly
correct.
At the time, they assumed the assumption was it was correct, and that was the belief.
Yes.
Now it's updated.
Yes.
Let's give an example of, let's say, pink eye, conjunctivitis. There's bacterial, there's viral.
Yes.
So if somebody has bacterial conjunctivitis, they can take an antibiotic, and that can help.
Yeah.
But if it's viral and they start taking
Will
antibiotics,
not help. This is what happened to me.
exactly.
This is what happened to me 2 years ago in Jordan. I
Oh.
got viral infection. I went to the ophthalmologist,
Yeah.
and then he gave me creams and drops and all antibacterial. And
Yeah.
I was using, thinking that's bacterial infection,
Yeah.
but it appeared to be not. Then I went back to him. I told him, "Doctor, what is this? It's increasing." Then he said, "Come, let's be. Oh, now it is clear for me. So we have to give you antiviral now." So he started with antibacterial, then shifted to antiviral, and took me 1 month from the beginning until the end, till I am back to normal.
You know, Doc, this is one of the reasons why I get a little bit so anxious when I go to doctors. I trust doctors. They know what they're doing. It's their job. I respect that. But sometimes when I go to the doctor and the doctor immediately writes an antibiotic, I ask myself, as a patient, I have the right to ask, to ask this question. Doc, are you sure this is a bacterial infection? How do you know? There are tests, swabs, tests in the lab, blood tests, whatever. Don't you think it depends on the doctor's experience. Some of them can be symptomatic without the need of tests, but some of them, I think you need to go further into testing.
There is 2 types of treatment. One is called empirical. One is called rational. Empirical, it depends on the data, information, what disease at this time of period, and the experience of the doctor, and they give and prescribe according to what they believe.
Right.
But more correct is the rational one, which depends on isolation of the causative agent and then prescribing according to the result from the lab. And this will let you target your enemy with the right bullet, with the right antibiotic. But if you use the other method, which is judging and depending on your information and experience, yes, of course, it is cheaper for the patient. And many patients don't like to go through the long procedure of analysis and go directly for the medicine. And usually they use the doctor's broad spectrum antibiotics.
Exactly, broad spectrum.
Broad spectrum.
Targeting
that
different types.
will kill gram-negative, gram-positive, anaerobes, etc.
Yeah.
And but again, continuous using of this, like some antibiotics now, the resistance is rising. So we are losing the battle. And this is a battle between us and between the microbes.
Doc, before we move on to the next question, so that we can wrap up the subject of antibiotic resistance, these superbugs, I just imagined a crazy Hollywood scenario. It's probable in the future, if this continues to be the case, the overuse of antibiotics. Modern science, modern medicine is completely dependent on antibiotics. For viruses, a lot of viruses, they don't have medications for viruses. Bacteria has more medications, more antibiotics, right? The point I'm trying to say is, if these superbugs take over and we're incapable of fighting them, and these pharmaceutical companies that you just said are refusing to develop a new class of drugs to combat these resistant bacteria, what's going to happen to us in the future? I think that's going to be the end of humanity.
Very black, picture we can see.
I know, it's a doomsday scenario.
Hopefully, always this battle between microbes and science will continue forever.
Yeah.
And there are other things, other hopes.
Yeah.
For example, they can now, research is developing using viruses against bacteria. And these are not the human viruses. These are viruses that are by origin against bacteria. We call them bacteriophage.
Right.
And there was a case of one tourist from America who went to one Arab country. Then he fell down His hip was broken. Then he acquired multi-drug resistant bacteria in the hospital.
Poor guy.
Then they were not
That's
able
nasty.
to treat. Then it was called Acinetobacter.
Yeah.
Then shifted him to Germany. Again, they could not treat American hospitals. Then back to United States of America. And finally, his wife, who was epidemiologist, doing her own research, then they found a researcher who is working on these viruses against bacteria, and then was able finally to convince everybody to use it, because she was told that he is anyhow dying because of this super bug, multi-drug resistant. They used it in high dose, and luckily he was saved by using this virus.
So there's hope in fighting these superbugs.
Yes.
That's great. Doc, talking about viruses, let's talk a little bit about one of your research topics, which is, may God protect all of us from this nasty virus, which is AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency virus. Yes. What can you tell us about AIDS? What is, quickly, briefly, because we don't have much time, the history of AIDS? How did this virus come to happen? Where did it come from? If you could briefly tell us, how does it transmit from one person to another? And what is the future of AIDS? Because if anybody heard somebody saying, you have AIDS, I think it's a horror movie. Yeah. It's like somebody saying, that's your death sentence. Because I know that, I mean, treatments have improved now. Maybe what do you call these treatments? Antiviral treatments. Yeah. Maybe they can extend the lifespan of the patient. Yeah, may God protect us all. Already. What do you say is going to happen in the future?
First of all, the origin, theories, but let us concentrate on one that is coming from apes, from monkeys.
Yeah. When, Doc? 70s, 60s?
Yeah, long time ago.
Long time.
But, because at that time communication and traveling was still not much developed.
Yeah.
So they say that it is coming from these apes to humans in very remote places, and it was only limited in these people. Then, because of fast communication, this now moved from that place to every place in the world. So, in the 80s when it started, and this Montagnier from France, he was the first pioneer discovering, and he shared the information to Galou in United States of America. And I met them in one conference, 10th International Conference in Japan, where I was invited because I made training for 1 year in Osaka Research Center. So this was the beginning, and it was so dangerous at that time that some countries, they invented Ministry of Defense against AIDS.
Wow.
I was at that time in Britain in the 80s doing my MSc and PhD, and Britain in that year, they allocated 25 million pounds for everything related to AIDS, education, TV,
awareness campaigns.
Awareness. So during that awareness campaign, many people were aware that this is related to sexual relations, related to sharing needles, blood.
Thank God it's not airborne.
Yeah, no,
Thank God.
It's not airborne.
Yes.
Yeah. More than 72% of cases were sex.
Yeah.
Yeah, direct sexual
But
contact.
is it true in the very beginning, it was the population that it affected the most was the homosexual people?
Yes, actually.
Men who have sex with men.
In the beginning,
yeah.
Because we have two diseases that were like Kaposi sarcoma. This is a cancer, which is usually used to be thought that this is in people above 60.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, they started seeing very young people, 15 years old, 16 years old, these gays, that they are developing this type of cancer.
Right.
And they were wondering what happened. And we learned that this is after 60.
So that was the first demographic?
This was the beginning.
The very first
and
demographic.
There was another disease that was Pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, which was not given any importance except in very rare cases of immunocompromised people who are having subnormal immunity.
Yeah.
Again, this was a killer for the people, which was very abnormal. So these two were the striking syndromes that made people to think what it is, until Montagnier in France isolated the virus, sent it to Galou in America, and then within short time they announced that this is a virus.
Okay. So what is the future right now for this virus?
The future now, HIV, as you can see, it's not covered much in media because they now consider it like any other chronic disease.
Yeah.
That's
true. It's not covered that much.
If the patient is diagnosed as early, in the proper time,
yeah,
and he was treated properly, and he stick to the treatment regimen, then he will be expected to live like his other mate who are free of the virus.
So if he's taking these antiviral drugs,
of course, but
it's a chronic condition.
Yeah, yeah. But,
and he can live a normal life.
Yes, but it is, how difficult to...
Absolutely. And the stigma of being... Imagine somebody, God forbid, imagine somebody, they're saying this guy has AIDS.
No, I tell you something which is related to what you want to say.
Yeah.
I was in the national committee to work against AIDS.
Yeah.
And the members who were with me, specialists and doctors, and they used to tell me that, well, we are afraid to go and speak to AIDS patients.
That's how scary
Although
it is.
they were spreading the awareness that this will not come by air, they will not by touching, and they were afraid to touch.
They're still afraid to touch them. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay, Doc, before we wrap up the episode, we have to discuss, because this is what's going on, we have to discuss COVID. COVID ended, thankfully. The pandemic ended. Yeah. But what can you tell us about COVID? Is there going to be another pandemic? How prepared is the world for another pandemic? And are we supposed to take more vaccines? Let's end the episode there.
Yeah, actually, you see, it is very difficult to predict what's coming.
Yeah.
Nobody predicted, for example, swine influenza.
Yeah.
Nobody predicted COVID.
Right.
So these are emerging problems that can anytime emerge.
Yeah.
But what is needed, these developed countries, the people who are having these developed companies, governments, etc., they have to be, and I am sure they are, ready for any outbreak.
Yes.
When there was swine influenza, everybody was very afraid, and it spread everywhere, not as fast as COVID, but and there was no lockdown.
What was it called? H5N1?
H1N1.
H1N1,
yeah.
Yes.
And this was actually killing about 5% of the infected people.
Right.
And we know people personally, we know them that they died of this virus.
I see.
So anytime outbreak can happen, pandemic can happen, but we, from the experience of COVID, now I think more experience, more readiness for
hopefully no more lockdowns, because that was the worst part.
I hope so. You never know what can, but the people are now not ready to have
another lockdown. Yeah,
I think they are going to resist.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's affecting economies. It's terrible.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So before we end, Doc, the episode, what would you tell us about the science of microbiology, in the sense that how can you protect yourself as best as you can and your family from nasty viruses and bacteria, apart from classic things like wash your hands and all these things we know? What would you advise people to do? How can you protect yourself? How could you educate yourself about microbiology?
It is, if you want to go deep in these things, then life becomes complicated.
Very convoluted.
So we have to live normal life.
Yes.
We just take normal precautions.
Yes.
When you deal with meat, for example, we have a lot of zoonotic diseases coming from meat. When you deal with dairy products, it should be pasteurized or boiled, so that anything coming from milk will be killed by boiling or pasteurizing.
Yes.
Anything dealing with the meat, after finishing dealing with raw meat, then you have to wash properly your cutting board, your hands, etc.
Yes.
So these precautions which you can do, you cannot absolutely prevent disease. We have vaccines, we have treatments, we have these normal precautions which we practiced during COVID. We don't add anything else. Otherwise, life becomes really
very
misery
difficult.
And very difficult.
You said something very important, Doc. You're right. I agree with you, because that's one of the forms of anxiety, OCDs and all that stuff. You don't want to become a hypochondriac.
Yes.
Constantly worrying about getting sick and disease and all that.
Exactly.
Live your life.
Yes.
Try your best to live a clean, healthy life, which means stay away from bad things, right? Including drugs and all that.
Don't forget that we are gifted by Allah the immune system.
Absolutely, yes.
Which is working day and night while you are standing, sitting, sleeping, eating. It is working.
Okay, before we end the episode, Doc, one more thing about the immune system. This needs an entire, a series of episodes. It's a fascinating subject. Can you please tell us, in just a few sentences, what is the best way to strengthen our immune system? And by the way, some people, they don't like the term strengthen because immune systems cannot be strengthened. I don't know. It's a long topic. The point is, what can we do to boost our immune systems?
Boost our immune system. You know, during COVID, they were telling about certain vitamins, vitamin D and also vitamin C.
By the way, the doctor prescribed for me vitamin C. and zinc. She said, take these, and I think it's working. I've been taking vitamin C and zinc every day for a few months.
Yeah, so we mainly depend on our immune system. Our immune system usually in the general population is very strong. It is helping us to live until now. If there was no immunity, nobody like me will live until now. And now also don't forget this very, very good health system which we have.
True.
And if we don't have health system, many of us will not be available until now. Because in the past, there was what we call natural selection. Anybody who's not having good immune system, he will die from the beginning and finish.
And the average lifespan was maybe 40 years, a long time ago?
Now people born at 6 months and then they are in the incubator under care and then they become full human beings and they become doctors.
And that's a blessing. Yes, that's a blessing.
So these things all together that are keeping healthy until now.
Absolutely. And you recommend exercise definitely, right?
Of course. That's very important.
For immunity.
Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Bloukh, for coming today. I wish we had more time to discuss many more topics. What would you tell aspiring young scientists and doctors who are getting into the field?
Yeah, you know, it depends upon the interest and the ambitions. Some people want to take this profession just to collect money and live their life. Others, they are living for science and for research and for developing things. So those who are living for science, for developing things, I am very hopeful that they will continue this field and they will put and add more knowledge and more expertise to this field and will help in prosperity of humanity.
Inshallah. Thank you very much, Dr. Bloukh.
Most welcome.
And wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you very much.